Hi guys, time for a new chapter here. This is our chapter on inequalities. It's going to be very, very similar to what we did with solving equations, only the slight difference of actually using inequality symbols. So we're going to start off on page 2 of your notes packet here. In talking about inequalities and graphing, there are some symbols for you to know first. And the first symbol that I want you to know, even though it really doesn't pertain to this chapter, is an equal sign. And that means that those two things are equals. That's important for us to kind of know going into this because inequalities, in means not equal. So our first symbol looks like this, and this is the symbol for less than. It looks like an L, so if you open it up, think about this, it actually gives you an L shape, L, so less than is L. In this one, it's going to be greater than. Okay, we also have less than or equal to, which has a line underneath, which kind of gets you back thinking the equal to part, so it allows it to be partially equal. There's a chance that it's equal or it's a chance that it's less than. On the other side of that, we can have greater than or equal to. So when we actually work with inequalities, we're going to notate them on the graph. So on the graph, certain inequalities are going to have what's called an open circle and then a line, kind of drawing which direction they go. So this would be an open circle. And the ones that have an open circle are going to be less than and greater than when we actually graph them. The reason that we do that is if we say x is less than 7, 7 is not included, so we leave an open circle to show that it's not included in things. Hopefully that kind of makes sense to you. That opening says that that number does not work, so it's not included. For some of them, we're going to actually have a closed circle and then a line to represent our shading. So we'll call this a closed circle. And these are going to be the less than or equal to and the greater than or equal to. It might make more sense to you now if it's closed, we're including that number is how you can think of it. So you can remind yourself including the number because it is allowed to be equal to that number. So that's kind of how I think about them. So we're going to skip this part for right this second and take a look down here using a number line. So draw a number line, graph the following. Anytime you draw a number line for me here, you need 3 numbers. So the way that I do that, this is x is less than 7. So you need a number line. In the middle, put 7. To the left, put 1 number lower and 1 number higher. So you should have 3 consecutive integers here. So x is less than 7. That means 7 is going to get an open circle. And I'm going to ask you so that it shows up, just right immediately attached to that circle, but just above the line, the number line, you're going to go ahead and draw some shading. That tells me that anything less than 7 is allowed to be a solution here. So x could be any number less than 7. So x could be 6, x could be 5, x could be 4, x could be 0. X could not be 10 though, because that does not fit in on this part of the number line. Looking at the next one, x is greater than or equal to -2. -2 is kind of our focus number. We'll put it in the center. Keep in mind negatives go backwards, so this is a -3 and a -1. This one is or equal to, so it's going to include the -2. So fill it in, and it's greater than, which means we're going to shade to the right. Forgot to kind of give you a little clue here. See this greater than or equal to? If you actually make it into an arrow, it kind of shows you which way to shade. Over here, less than or equal to, make it into an arrow, showed you which way to shade. That works as long as your x is on the left-hand side here. Last example, x is greater than -4. So -5, -3, you're right, open circle here. Arrow tells you shade to the right. Okay? So, next thing is going to be talking about working with inequalities. So adding and subtracting with them, basically your steps are solve like an equation. And then you need to graph your solution. So inequalities are slightly different because they get a graph with it instead. So solve like an equation, graph your solution. Keep this page handy. We're going to come back. Just look at the next page. This is solving one-step equations. One of your things that you want to make sure that you have is your variable on the left. it's going to make it easier to graph. If your variable is on the right, we can just switch it at the end if you'd like to. So in this one, we're going to subtract 39 from both sides. X is less than or equal to, I bet you half of you just wrote equal signs there, and 100 minus 39 is going to be 61. So 61 is our key number, that's what we're looking at because this is our solution. 60 and 62, closed circle, shade to the left. And in the next example, I apologize, this red isn't showing up very well here. In the next example, drop a line down your inequality. You're going to add 3 to both sides. Your goal is still the same. You're still getting your variable by itself. P is less than -2. So -2 is our big number. -3, -1, open circle, and shade to the left. P is less than -2. This one we just have fractions. -1/2 from both sides. We get X is greater than 5. So 5 in the middle, 4, 6 up to the right, open circle, shades to the right then. Last example, we're going to add 4.5. So P is less than, this is going to be 13.5. So you can kind of do this 2 ways. I'm going to go ahead and put this 13.5, make this 14, and make this 13. You could also just do 13.5, 14.5, and 12.5 if you really wanted to. Either way, it doesn't matter. Open circle and shade to the left. Final thing here is multiplying and dividing with them. So in these, you solve like an equation, just like normal. There's only one rule. If you multiply or divide by a negative, flip the inequality symbol. I'll just call it a sign for sake of argument here. And your last step is to graph. So you have to be careful. The only time you have to flip a sign is if you multiply or divide by a negative. So take a look at example 1. We're going to go ahead and divide by 4. I just divided by a positive, so the sign stays the same, and my answer is a -4. Open circle, shade left. In the next example, drop a line. I need to divide by -80. Oh wait, I divided by a negative, so I flip the sign. So instead of it being greater than, it's now less than. And I'm going to get -10, so -11, -10, -9, open circle, and it's now flipped. If you flip it over, t divided by 4 is greater than 2. I'm going to multiply by 4 on both sides. I just multiplied by a positive, so things stay the same. 7, 8, 9, graph. Last example, x divided by -2, so I multiply by a -2. Oh, what's that you say? A negative? Flip the sign. So -3, -2, and -1, open circle, shade to the right. I'm going to show you 2 more examples here. School auditorium is 300 seats. If 89 people have tickets for the school play, what is the maximum number of how many more people can attend? So basically we're saying X is the people more that can come because there's already 89 seats, and this is compared to 300, which is the maximum. That tells me that I need to have fewer or equal to 300 people inside that auditorium. Minus 89, X is less than or equal to 211 people. So we can have less than or equal to 211 people more come. Jeanette wants to tile the floor of a room in her house. The square tiles measure 3/4 feet on each side. The room is 10 feet wide. Write and solve an inequality. Determine how many tiles she should buy to form one row. So 3/4 of a foot times X tiles compared to 10 feet wide. Now, do we want this to be less? Absolutely not. We're actually going to need this to be greater than or equal to. And then she's going to have to cut off a piece of the tile, essentially. In this one, multiply by the reciprocal. And we get X is greater than or equal to. Not going to work out nicely, so I have 40 thirds, which I really need to break down to be 3 times 13 and 1/3 tiles, which tells me she needs more than 13 and 1/3 tiles, which tells me she needs to buy 14 or more, because 13 would not be enough. She needs over that, so 14 or more tiles would work.